Okay.
And welcome everybody to the 29th Annual Woods Hole Film Festival. We're here this morning with Naomi Listener and Lucas Hassel, and we're going to be discussing their screenplays in the comedy genre. They are the runners up and finalists, I should say, for the screenplay competition. And we're joined from Melbourne, Australia. And Lucas, where are you joining us from?
New York City.
And New York City. All right, and I'm calling in from San Diego. So we've got several time zones here, but but let's dive into these wonderful screenplays that you have submitted to the competition. Let's start with Naomi. Tell us a little bit about your work that we are discussing here.
Okay, well, it's called The Imbalance, and I wrote it because there's a huge, and I know it's not just in Australia, I know it's all over the world, an imbalance in the film industry. Not just if you're of color, but if you're female, if you're mature aged female, etc., etc. And I saw so much, so I thought if I write about it as is, then people there's a kind of barrier when you're hard hitting, but if you're hard hitting with comedy, you can get away with anything. So I kind of don't pull any punches and say it as it is. But I found myself laughing out loud because some of the things that I said, in the script, just from watching, going to castings, and my other friends going to castings, and everything that we go through. So, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Lucas, can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Well, Girls on the Run, similar to Naomi, I was always taken aback at the lack of representation by minorities in the film industry or whatever. And I wanted to explore the story with three female protagonists in their early 80s. So it's essentially a journey of three elderly ladies that escape their nursing home to seek out sort of a screening of an old Clark Gable movie in LA, and they go on this crazy road trip together. So it's really about sort of overcoming challenges and connecting with people that you don't on the surface have anything to connect for.
Yes. Well, I found it really interesting that both of your screenplays deal with the realities of ageism. And in this day and age, when people are talking about representation and identity, there is a lot of talk about, the BIPOC crowd. But amongst that, we do not hear much about ageism. And so I'd be curious, Naomi, when you talk about some of the experiences that you've seen, which you eloquently describe and place in your screenplay in a very, in a bittersweet comedic way. Can you tell us a little bit more for those of us in the audience who have not? Well, I've seen it, but those in the audience who have not read the screenplay.
Okay, well, I mean, I was for 2 years on the board of Women in Film and TV in Australia, so I hear a lot. But even when we go to castings, I mean, some of the things that they say, I actually had somebody who asked me, "Am I okay to walk?" And I said, "Hello," and they said for a long distance, and I said, "You know that Jennifer Lopez is in her 50s? Like what planet are you from?" And I said, just put me up against you. Not only will I outrun you, I will kick your ass. And they just get really shocked by it. It's just, their stupidity is beyond belief. And so I'm really sick of I don't want to be told that that I've got a use by date, or that I'm suddenly unattractive, that you get to a certain age and that you shop at the old woman's ugly home, that you don't have any fashion sense, or that you let yourself go, because that's how they write.
Right.
And I don't think that it's healthy for anyone, and it's not really a great thing for a young girl to go, "Oh, well, is this going to happen to me? Am I going to suddenly become invisible?"
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. And how about you, Lucas? What specifically, and it's again in your screenplay, but for those who have not had the pleasure of reading it, what is it that you found that you really needed to be conveying in this film about age?
Well, I think the drive for this film was less about sort of age, and particularly women of age, then actually a pet peeve of mine is how people are afraid of the notion of death, which to me is as natural as birth. And I think as a society, it's something that we just shy away from. It's sort of this thing that we know it's going to happen at some point, but we certainly don't talk about it. And it's really, really awkward if somebody brings it up. And I think in my mind, it was just interesting to jump into these women's lives when statistically they don't have a long time left, and what they do with it is what matters. And I think, of course, that qualifies for anyone at any age. What you do with your time matters. But of course, if you're at 85, there's an urgency to it. And I think everyone should live with urgency at all times. You should never take any time for granted. So it was really interesting to dive into these women's lives and see sort of how they have almost come out on the other side of, like, to them it is about to happen, right? So they're not nearly as afraid of it or as intimidated by that notion as we might be in a slightly younger decade.
Absolutely. I find it also, because you're dealing with people of an age, that the subject of your screenplays could just as easily have been categorized in the dramatic category in a way. But they are firmly rooted in comedy. And I'd like for you both, let's start again with Naomi. How did you choose comedy as the root of this? And where did you see the lines intersecting between comedy and, something that was a little bit more dark?
I think sometimes you get a stronger message through if you deal with comedy to present it. Otherwise, it can present as heavy, but it really pushes the message, but in a fun way. And also it means that you can be really politically incorrect.
Yes, that's right. It's a little bit more forgiving. Yes.
And I certainly am. I just go, oh, I'm just going to put it in there. I don't care. And I think that's what I love about Lucas too, because we just I don't think that we have any barriers. We just kind of say it as is.
Yes, it's so true. And how about you, Lucas?
Well, I think all my other screenplays are very dark and very not in the comedic genre. This was the first script I ever wrote, and it was never quite right. It was like that first pancake that always looks awful. It may taste good, but it's just shapeless, and you put it aside and would never serve it for anyone. And so I had this script lying around, knowing that there was something there. And then a year and a half ago, I took it back up and did a massive rewrite with fresh eyes, sort of 14 years later, pretty much, actually.
Oh, really?
And so, to the comedy question, it's really not something that I'm drawn towards as a person.
I see.
I'm not interested in comedies on TV. I don't watch any of that stuff. And so essentially, I think my script is a drama sort of gussied up in comedy. I think most of what I write is drama, and then it's gussied up in horror, or gussied up in sci-fi, or gussied up in comedy. And in this case, it just lent itself to that.
Yeah.
Because having, three women in age of 85 travel across the country in a sort of dour and drama kind of fashion would be just tough to watch, maybe. I don't know. I felt in this case, the comedy served to propel the story and keep people leaning forward.
Very true. So then this brings me to one of the areas that I certainly look at as one of the screenwriting judges is about the development of character. Mm-hmm. And so I'll start with Lucas on this one now. How did you form your characters? Were they based on people that you know, or were they compilations? How did you go about creating such vivid characters?
It's a good question. I started with my central character, which is Bella. It's a character who is in the early stages of dementia. She's really she's a relatively passive role in the script, really. Things happen around her, but she's the instigating factor. She's the one that gets the story rolling, because she's the one who's the Clark Gable fan and the one who gets the idea of going to LA for this particular screening as sort of a last-ditch effort before she's put away in a home, and she's sort of lost for good. And her best friend then, I felt as a contrast, would be, you know, Bella is a woman with a heart of gold, and then her best friend is like the opposite to that. So it was really interesting to play with the contrasts of the contrasts of these two women, and then also why they loved each other, because of course at the core of Sweet Sue, as the character is called, the tough nut, there is a lovely heart of gold as well. It's just hidden behind many different layers, and so that friendship had to make sense, but I also wanted to explore those contrasts. And then I thought, let me interject the third character as something completely different to those two, because she's going to be sort of this triangle factor, and she again would have to offer new things to both Bella and Sweet Sue they wouldn't have come across before. So it just became this very interesting dance of these three characters that had different hopes and expectations and ways of looking at life, and yet also could find similar ground as part of this journey, right? So I was looking for that arc of three, you know, opposites in a way, in many different ways, and then along the road, of course, they realize that they're not as different as they thought initially, and it's okay to be different and yet not be threatened by other people's characters.
I see that structurally in the way that you created those, but I was wondering whether they are informed by people that you know or
Nope.
people in your life, or are
Nope.
they
They're
entirely?
not really. I mean, they're, you know, maybe they're characters that would inspire me. If I had read something or see something, I always make little mental notes of things that impress me. It's never sort of the whole film or the whole character, the whole actor. It's snippets that something really stands out to me.
Yeah.
And I might make a note of that little moment hit me, and why did it hit me? And then I process why it hit me. And then I could sort of do homages to that in some of my works later. It might fit in. I'm like, that's where I can use that little bit, right? So, you know, Sweet Sue is named after the character in Some Like It Hot,
Ah,
where she's the band leader of Marilyn Monroe's band. That's Sweet
yes,
Sue. She's on this train. She takes pills because she has ulcers, and she's cool, but she's no nonsense. You know, she's a
right.
tough eater or whatever. So I think Sweet Sue probably, now that you ask me, probably was pulled out of that character somehow.
I
Uh,
see.
and
Interesting.
then maybe Bella is close to my grandmother, probably, who was a sweetheart and had that thing going on. And then Lucinda was, no, she was thrown out of nothing, I think.
Wonderful. And Naomi, how about Sally and Celeste? Tell us a little bit about those characters.
Well, I quote a Sally because actually I'm a big fan of Peanuts, and I just actually took the character Sally, but I called her Sally Myers after the director Nancy Myers. So my homage to an American female director, and Cecile was based on one of my friends who is just naturally posh. I mean, that's no other way of describing her. She's like a great girl, you know, a great woman, but she's just, there's something about her that's always has this, you know, air about her. And I'm always her opposite friend in real life. And she's happily married in real life. I've gone, you know, I'm divorced. And I so there is a lot of me in Sally as a woman who's kind of gone through divorce. And I did have a mother who said, so how are you going to survive? And like, you know, and I do have the Jewish mother who said, so are you going to find a husband? And so my mother doesn't really know this, and thankfully she's hopeless on social media. But I did base a lot of Sally's mother on my own mother. But yeah, it's and I think that you get really, you know, when you draw on real life, you do get, you know, depth. And it's the first time I've written a comedy, and I tend to go for dramas. And the last thing that I wrote was a period piece. But yeah, I just I really love that they're totally different, and that Celeste ends up having to live in Sally's place, and it's a real come down for her. But she's really, that she really kind of fights for her, because Sally is hopeless in love and starting again, which sounds a bit familiar. I just wish that, when you walked past a male in life, that you got this jolt of lightning that said, "Oh, don't go near him. Don't go near him. Just, I'm telling you, girlfriend, save yourself from this one. Don't even start up." And so Sally is, looks for love in all the wrong places before she finds her feet. So yeah, it does. It's just looking at really the reality of starting again in life.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's like almost like a much more comedic version of Eat, Pray, Love in that regard.
Absolutely.
um, okay, so from the writer's perspective, I think also our listeners might want to know something about your creative process of approaching a feature-length film. And I'd like to start with Lucas on this. How do you go about it? There are some people who say they're list makers and structuralists who know right at the start where everything's going, and others who are very much like intuitive writers who just start with the characters and let them take them on the journey. And there are any number of variations on either of those themes. Can you tell us a little bit about your process in approaching not only this screenplay, but some of your others as well, how they might have been?
This screenplay, it was atypical because I wrote it before I really knew what I was doing. So in the case of the original Girls on the Run, it was one of those things of like, I think I want to write, I think I can write, so let me just go for it. And I got this idea, and then I worked through it from there, and then I realized, wow, writing with no sort of set vision in mind, just it unleashes a lot of creativity, but it also makes for endless rewrites. And a year and a half later, a rewrite number, God knows what, the lesson from that, once I started taking writing seriously, got into writing groups and took classes and blah, 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 blah. Now I would never do it that way. So what I do now is much more of, first of all, I figure out, do I have something to say, right? Because it's often a pet peeve of mine when I read other people's scripts. They ask me to read their scripts. I can tell they don't really know why they wrote it. And I feel very strongly about this fact that you have to figure out why you're creating this piece to start with. So I think that's the kernel of any good work. And so once I know what it is I'm trying to explore, then it's a matter of figuring out what genre supports that notion the best. What situations would come up that could support what it is you're trying to create. And so that could be different genres depending on what the topic is, right? So I think having that kernel, and then now just technically, I always would do an outline, spend the hard work of creating the outline, because it's hard work to try to come up with your entire story before you even put sort of pen to paper on the actual script. It's really, really, really difficult. And I think you just have to allow yourself to go, well, maybe it's not the final product, but this is the outline that I see happening. And so I spend a ton of time working out the outline. Once that hard work is done, it is so much fun to go in and put the meat on the bones.
Right.
Because you have a solid plan from beginning to end, as opposed to meandering around. And as I said, at the end of the day, you may end up with the same script, but you'll get there faster if you work from the outline format. And I think I spoke to some other writers about it. I think something like 90% of the writers write without an outline, and only 10% of the writers use an outline. But
wow.
I think that's the way I would advise people to go about it, if anybody asks me my opinion.
May I ask where you got those numbers, or is that just your own personal observation, 90 to 10%?
I think it was one of those early days. It was like one of those Robert McKee nonsense things
yes.
that I would never do today. But it was back in, God, when I started, they had a 3-day Robert McKee thing. And I think it was one of the percentages that he threw up there.
Wow. Wow. So you took McKee's course?
Yes. And it was not a good decision for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, nothing against Robert McKee or people that love his thing. For me personally, it just locked me. It became, his teaching became so technical that I became overwhelmed about, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that. Like the level of the way he proposes you create a script
Right, right.
just made it so unfathomable and unreachable for me that I literally stopped writing for 6 months after that. And
Wow.
I had to go back and distill the few tidbits that I thought, well, that's helpful, but I cannot work the way that I actually don't suspect he works, to be honest. But that's just me being a cynic. Um, uh, so yeah, so that was my experience with that.
So this was the exception to the rule then. If I take what you have just told us, that you started out without
Correct.
that, you know,
Correct. And cut to me rewriting it, a year and a half ago, 12 years after I wrote the first draft. So point in hand, I mean, this might have been the longest script in the making, and rewriting all like old scripts
yeah,
is, I think, it's incredibly difficult, because not only do you have to sort of rewrite it and make it work, you also had to forget all the stuff that you plotted around with before and get out of your bad habits from back then and really try to reimagine it fresh and to sort of
yeah.
reset the brain on those concepts that you've been plotting around in for so long is very, very difficult. So I think I managed to do it with the help of some smart friends I shared the script with, and just was brutal about what stayed and what I jettisoned.
Kill your darlings, as
That's
they
it.
say. But you didn't kill the script, which was really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think I did. I'm happy with it now.
Wonderful. And Naomi, please tell us a little bit about your process. How did you go about creating your wonderful screenplay?
Oh, thank you. Well, I actually, even there was so much to say, I ended up writing a sequel. But for me, I form an idea in my head, and when it's there, I type away furiously. But when I get to this stage where I need a break, or I have a bit of a block, for me, I start exercising. I go outside somewhere that's pretty. I take a walk, go for a walk, and I listen to music. And then when my mind is really relaxed, then that's when I start thinking and getting more ideas. I'm not someone who, writes and does more drafts and more drafts. And I know we all do things differently. For me, no matter what I've written, I always think that my first idea is there for a reason, and I tend to follow that. And so I read it. If there's any changes that I need to make, I make them. But I don't, yeah, I tend to do everything, I think, in life on instinct.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, so and for me, when I read it back as being a comedy, if I don't laugh out loud, then I know that there's something wrong. But if I laugh, then and when my son was living with me, he's moved out now, because I'd be up all hours doing it. He'd hear me laughing, and he'd say, "Mum, you can't laugh at your own script." He said, "You're so lame," and I said, "That's a good sign, you know."
Sure. How old is your son?
Oh, well, I've got two. My eldest one is going to be 30 soon, and my youngest one is going to be 28 later this year. So I can't keep telling people I'm 35.
Well, I asked just because the humor, of the children is so dependent on age as well, and if they're older, I think they might be able to see some of the complexity of, mom's humor. And if they're younger, there's snark beasts, I mean, so so
They say it like it is, because I remember when I was trying to learn to do a particular accent, and I was living in my old house when I was married. Billy, my youngest son, would yell from upstairs, "You suck, Mum, that's terrible." And then one day he'd yell down, "You know what, Mum, you don't suck at that anymore, you've got it." And so my kids just, there's no barrier, they just say it. And I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. they've also grown up. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So I'm curious now. You both have two really wonderful feature-length comedic scripts, and when I say comedy, it's really hard, to even place these in those strict categories because they are very complex, and they're not just straight comedies. And I think it's that texture that makes them so rich. Um, where do you want to go from here? What is the next step? And I'm asking for people who may be at a stage where they've got a feature length script, and let's say if they're if they're as nearly as good as yours, and they won some awards, what next? What do you do with that?
With
So,
this particular
sorry.
with this particular script?
Yes, with this particular script.
Okay, well, recently, um, my script won, first prize, in a film festival, and they gave me an ink tip subscription. So I've got it online, and literally, oh gosh, I don't want to jinx it, but literally, a few days ago, somebody downloaded it. So I'm hoping that they make me an offer. You never
Wonderful.
know. So that's what I'm looking. I'm looking to sell this one.
Wonderful. So you would be aiming to direct it as well?
Um, I haven't really thought about, directing or acting in it or whatever. I think that I'm really open to negotiation. I don't really want to lock myself into anything.
Sure, sure. Okay.
Well, I think for screenwriters out there and so forth, to your question, if you're an unknown, if you have no connections, if you're sitting in Boise, Idaho with a great script, whatever, I mean, your options are relatively limited. It's basically trying to get into the bigger competitions, of which there are maybe 10. I mean, the biggest, of course, is the Nichols Fellowship and so forth. But then, it goes down from there. And then there are film festivals like yours that also take screenwriting very seriously and give a lot of time to reading screenplays. So all those things together can help get you some attention. I mean, film festivals will give you laurels and will give something that makes your script look attractive to production houses. And the bigger competitions can actually get you meetings and get you representation, hypothetically. Girls on the Run 3 weeks ago won the Screencraft Fellowship. I was one of 3 lucky writers that is the fellow this year. So if it wasn't for COVID, who knows? But in November, they would have flown me out to LA to meet with a whole list of managers and agents and studio execs who have agreed to meet the fellows of this particular program. So that will be helpful. It's only this year that I've begun to think about getting representation as a writer, because I'm mainly an actor.
Oh, okay.
I've directed my own films and want to direct my own scripts as well. But now that I have, I think, a good portfolio of screenplays and a pilot, I think it would be a good time to go out and secure somebody to try to get my work out there more. But I mean, I think I have one pilot and I have probably 6 feature screenplays that are good to go, and 3 of those aren't options, and the pilot is in the work with the different companies. So there's really only 2 or 3 scripts that are available. So that's why I want to make a move now while I have something to actually put on the table. And Girls on the Run is one of the 2 screenplays that are still sort of available, so to speak.
Wonderful.
So let's see what happens with that. I have had some interest based on the Screencraft Fellowship thing and being on the red list on Coverfly for a while. So we'll see.
Wonderful.
I'm happy that I can act with Lucas in something. That would be fun.
Oh, I would love to do that. It would be amazing.
That would be great.
Which was that? Did you repeat that, Naomi? I didn't hear that.
I said I hope one day that Lucas and I get to act together in something.
Oh, amazing! That would be amazing.
Good. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah.
And for those who may not know, that Naomi and Lucas know one another through the festival circuit because of previous projects that they've been on, as actors and also as writers, or primarily as actors
and filmmakers.
And filmmakers.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, real Renaissance people here.
Yeah.
And
I was lucky enough to write a short script that won at Holly Shorts Film Festival out in LA, and I didn't realize it, but the winning screenplay got a production deal, so I got my film produced completely, and I flew in and directed it, and they did all of it. So if you have a short script, send it to Holly Shorts. A quick shout out to them as well.
Holly Shorts, good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
Well, that shades into the next question I was going to ask you. Have either of you had your screenplays produced? Any previous projects produced? Um, so, Lucas, you've told us about a short that was produced.
Yeah, so that was produced. I mean, in terms of feature scripts, no. I've had 3 of them optioned right now, and let's see what happens with that. One of them I was set to direct this fall, and the horror film Silhouette was optioned by Emergence Pictures, and that's been pushed to the spring. Who knows? It's totally up in the air now.
Right.
So that would have been my first as a feature script director and sort of made into a film. But other than that, it's been my own shorts.
And that was in the dramatic feature length category, Emergence.
The Silhouette was a horror, and then I have a drama that was top 30 at Nichols called The Mechanic, which has been in option for 5 years, and it's been close to getting the talent they want, and then they fell apart, and then they've been close again. So that's been a work in its own. I mean, when you hear about those films that took 10 years to make, well, if and when this film gets made, it'll be that story, because it's pretty incredible how people have worked hard to make that film happen. But it's a very tricky subject matter, very sexual, very violent. And so it's been tricky to secure the finances for that. But it's a really, really, it's probably the best script I think I've written. I'm very excited about that script, but let's see if it happens. And then the pilot is about to be shopped around LA right now, a TV pilot called Galapagos, which is sci-fi, post-apocalyptic sci-fi. So very different.
What was the name of that one?
Galapagos.
Oh, Galapagos. Okay, post-apocalyptic sci-fi.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, yeah. And how about you, Naomi? Have any of your projects gone to full production?
Oh, well, okay. 2 of the shorts that I wrote, directed, got distribution, so that was great. But somebody wrote a psychological thriller, and they got to a certain point, and then they were stuck. And the person's actually become one's my business partner, and the other is now got this huge country hit song, and they were stuck on the film, and they just asked me to come in, and I said, I don't know how to write a psychological thriller, and they said just anyway. So that was played. We had a screening at the cinema in Australia, but now we're just really working on a TV series and a feature, and you never know. I've had a few interests from overseas asking me to send rough cuts, but I don't really want to send a rough cut. I just want to wait. I don't want to rush anything. I don't want them to see it before before we're happy with it. And had the world not stopped for COVID, then we would have finished it already. So we're just my business partner is working on the edit side.
Wow. So it's still possibly it's under consideration at this point, or?
Well, the TV series that we're been working on together is kind of a thriller sci-fi, in sections, and the others in a historical feature. But it's hopefully we will get it up and running. And well, I don't know what's happening with. Nothing much is really lasting at cinemas. It's all going to streaming.
Right.
And I think that's going to be happening for a while with what's happening in the world, and that's where I see my projects at, realistically.
Well, that is related to the next question, and it was ostensibly about COVID effects, in the industry, but I really wanted to know about other formats that you may be writing in. Like, are you writing for big screen, or are you aiming towards, more like TV series? I guess Lucas said that he's writing a pilot for a television series, I presume.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I mean, that didn't come out of the the COVID situation. I mean, I'm sure now a lot of people are realizing, well, I have to focus on scripts for streaming. This notion of creating a feature film and going to the cinema, that's going to be troublesome for quite a while. So I'm sure now people are sort of changing tack. But I actually changed tack maybe 2 years ago. Already then, the writing on the wall was that if you're a writer and want to be relevant in today's writing, you really got to start embracing the notion of writing pilots and writing a TV series. Having a portfolio with just screenplays felt very last year.
yeah, yeah,
2 years ago, I was invited up to New York State Film up at Vassar for a week with my pilot. And that was the first year. They had 9 writers every year that come up for a week. And it was the first year that there were more pilots than screenplays. And since then, that has been the trend. They've had more pilots than screenplays.
yeah.
So I feel there is a turning in the industry that it's important to as a writer to have some of those under your belt.
And I will ask Naomi the same. Have you been changing your genre?
Well, I know with the imbalance, because I wrote a sequel, the moment I finished the sequel, the first thing that dawned on me is this could easily be, I could easily change it into a 6-part series. There is that room because I've written so much for it. And that is definitely an option. And I think, and I agree with Lucas that you really have to just be open to everything. And now when I write, because I am writing something at the moment, there is that at the back of my mind, what will I make it? And then I thought, just be open and write more, so you've got those options.
But I will say that I had a feature script already that I had worked hard on and so forth, and then I adapted that into the TV pilot as a way of teaching me what pilots are like. And the realization I had, which I had not expected, was how different the format and the type of writing, how you even unveil characters, how you unveil geography in pilots, is very different to a feature screenplay. I finally felt I had the format down for feature screenplays. I felt good about that, and I still feel good about that. But I feel like a real novice when it comes to TV writing or TV pilot writing, because it really is a whole different beast.
Yeah.
Particularly a pilot, more so than the entire series. The pilot is such a specific thing where you have to unveil what your trunk of your show is and who your protagonists are and what the main conflicts are, not just for that episode, for that season, maybe for the whole series, and making that come across in a non-expositional way. And it was just so hard. I mean, I think the pilot was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to write and finesse. And then, so I thought I could sort of cut and paste from my feature and, it's all good. But then the realization is that I could take a snippet of the feature and then I had to expand on that.
Right.
So essentially I'm writing, a whole new screenplay for each episode almost.
Well,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
One of my screenplays, I decided to turn into a book, and everybody's, and I found out when you write a book, it has to be between 80,000 at minimum words to, up until 120,000 words, because they don't really like more than that. And so it made me have to write, like I'd finished the script, but to make it into a book, I had to add a whole nother character and whole other stories and make it go onto this other journey. So you really do have to be adaptable, I guess, to survive.
Absolutely. I was going to unpack that transition in the way that we approach writing feature lengths versus like the pilot for a series. But before I do that, I just wanted to make sure if we have any listeners out there, please feel free to pose your questions in the chat box and we will answer them. We don't have any questions yet, but I did want to dive into that process or that transition. We talked earlier about the need or whether or not anyone does any outlining or storyboarding. I don't know if any of you do any kind of storyboarding, but certainly when you're creating a series, as you probably know, you've got to know, particularly with that episode, it's the kernel of what's going to happen for the remainder of the series if you're trying to sell 6 episodes, 8 episodes. So how does that impacted your writing? Shall we start with Lucas, since you've just finished writing? You're trying to pitch a
Well,
series.
so the experience in terms of writing a TV series has been, I've aligned myself with some very good people in LA who know TV writing and that world infinitely better than I do, and it's been a real learning experience to hear them discuss the process of how the pitching should work, how the unveiling of the show should be, and so forth. And one of the things that sort of I've taken away from where we are with our pilot is that you do want to have a sense of where it's going,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Season 1 in particular, and suggestions for season 2 and season 3. But I was also advised that a lot of the times you don't want to come in completely loaded with episodes bogged down to the detail, because some of these exec producers also they quite like to have a say. And
Right.
if you can incorporate some of their ideas, your pitch already stands a better chance.
Right.
So it's okay to not come in with everything completely mapped out,
Yes.
which frankly was a relief, because that's just a whole different type of hard work. So where I have notions of where this needs to go, I know exactly where it ends, which is very helpful.
Yes.
Then it's also a matter of, there's certain things you can't prepare for. You don't know if it's going to be a 5-season show or if it's going to last 2, and you're going to be told, well, you're going to get 2 seasons or 3 seasons. And then you have to be open to, well, this storyline could develop further,
Right.
time permitted and success permitted, or not, right? So I have plenty of suggestions for where it could go and what could happen, but I'm also flexible.
Yes. Well, it is a transition from being the sole creator to the potential to working with a writing room.
Exactly.
Into
Exactly.
collaboration.
And I originally thought I would be a terrible team player, because I like to sit in my own corner and write my own worlds and do my own things. But I went out to Cinestory for Writers Retreat out there, and they had mock writers' rooms with actual showrunners. And the experience was, if you're with really smart writers, it is a gift to be in that room. If you're people who have a sense of when to stop talking and to listen to others and not just barge ahead, but actually have great ideas you can bounce off each other, it was incredibly inspiring. So I came back thinking, a writer's room with the right people would not be so bad.
Exactly. And we're almost at time here. Naomi, did you notice any kind of change in your approach to writing for the smaller screen?
Yeah, I know that sometimes I just write a whole lot, and then then it dawns on me, okay, I have to make it, either 20-minute episodes or 30-minute episodes or whatever. So then you have to find a place where it finishes. So it means that sometimes you do have to kind of go over it and go, a show doesn't work ending here. So it does make you, so I might still keep what I've got, but it goes into the next episode. Right. And I think one of my things that I do is I watch a lot now. I've been watching lots of serials and sort of what inspires me to watch certain shows and what characters am I drawn to and why. And I think that you have to, see who you admire, and I don't mean steal their ideas, but why you like them, and remember that when you're writing.
Wonderful. Well, we are at time, and I could clearly go on, and I hope that we will meet again during the festival and continue with this conversation. But I want to thank you both, Naomi Listener and Lucas Hassel, for joining us for this Screenwriter chat, and wishing you all the best. I cannot wait for the announcement of the winner of the Woods Hole Film Festival screenwriting competition.
Thank you. You've been a great moderator. I really appreciate your questions and time, Hortense.
Thank you so much.
And exactly, Lucas beat me to it, but yes, absolutely. And it was really great meeting you and catching up with Lucas yet again.
Likewise.
Thank you. Enjoy the festival and enjoy everybody. There's more to come. Take care.
Oh,
Bye.
thank
Thank
you
you all.
so much.